It's really nice to have an adult in the White House instead of a screaming brat man-child that we had previously. Now, as I will be the first to say, Joe Biden is not by any means flawless. Okay, we know he's totally off the rails wrong when it comes to women's rights in terms of their sex-based rights. He has been on the mark when it's come to that ludicrous chicken shit Supreme Court decision of the other day, or undecision, I should say, undecision, non-decision, allowing that draconian Texas abortion law to take place. So we know, and we also could say, yes, it was a mess there in Afghanistan, but it wasn't, nothing there was going to be nothing short of chaotic after all the years we were there. So yeah, he has his flaws, but I will say it's great to have leadership on this COVID thing, because this is a crisis. This really is a crisis. It was allowed to be a crisis. When it first came, I believed it was overblown like AIDS, that it was just made into something much bigger than it would be, or like West Nile virus, or like Ebola. There were those things, but of course those didn't get to become huge pandemics because of proactivity, being proactive on the part of the government. And AIDS, we know, targeted specific populations, at least in the West. So it never was going to be the plague that we've got now. And this is a plague what we have now, because of government inaction early on, because of brainwashing by the media and by some of these cranks that are given way too much airtime, regardless of political persuasion, and because you know, it's a great political issue for the GOP to sit there and manipulate a large segment of the public to mistrust governmental policies about this. And why do they do this? Why is the GOP doing this, so many of them? Because they don't want Biden to succeed. It's really that clear. They want to get political mileage out of Biden failing to contain the pandemic. So that's what this is about. They don't give a shit if people die. And what do we have now? Like 700,000? Let's look at the current stats for coronavirus, if we can get into it. Oh, crap. I hope we can get into it. Okay, so we got 41,743,069 cases total since early 2020. And the deaths now are at 677,037. And we have that worldwide, if you really want to know, 224,910,302 and 4,635,258. So lots and lots of cases now, when this thing could have been nipped in the bud. If we had had a leader in the White House and somebody who was qualified to actually be in the White House, this thing could have been controlled much sooner. So, or at least isolated. So now Biden delivered a speech, and it was a good speech. That was on Thursday, and of course it got a lot of downvotes. Look at all the downvotes on this particular video, and of course there's several from various media sources. But yeah, they all, you know, the anti-vax people, oh, my freedom, my freedom, my freedom. It's not your freedom. You don't have the right to go out and kill others because you won't take responsibility for your actions. You won't take responsibility as an adult, but act like a whiny little kid that, oh, you're not going to be the boss of me type of shit. No, it's, No, this isn't. This is a public health crisis. But the big problem is we have generally people under the age of 60 who have never lived under a real plague until now. And while this disease has been compared to AIDS, it's really not comparable to AIDS. It is, as some have observed, more comparable to polio. It's a lot more comparable to that. And polio was terrifying. I'm old enough to have gotten the Sabin vaccine. It was actually a sugar cube. And I got that around, well, I think he developed that, or it was first available around 1962, I think, if I wanted to look it up. So that right about the time it came out, they offered the sugar cube. They offered the sugar cube vaccine especially to kids, because polio, although adults could get it, and I think a third of the cases were among adults, children tended to be more negatively impacted by it. They were more likely to die. They were more likely to be wind up suffering some paralysis. In the worst cases, it was children would end up in an iron lung, or even adults. And that's what they had then, instead of more modern respirators. Although I was reading that iron lungs are making somewhat of a comeback because they're cheaper to use now with COVID, that they're finding that these would be useful and for more people, because so many people are getting severe reactions to getting the disease. But back in those days, that was the worst case scenario, as being in an iron lung. And by 2010, I think it was, or maybe, I think it was 2010, there were only 10 people in the world that were still on an iron lung, or 2014, maybe it was 2014. Just, fingers on both hands. And I don't know if anybody is living today who was a polio victim who's on an iron lung. There might not be any now. But polio was bad shit. And there was a concerted effort to get rid of this disease. Thanks to the March of Dimes, thanks to FDR, who was a victim of polio. And he helped start the Warm Springs Foundation. That was the start of it. And then Eddie Cantor was making a crack, comedian Eddie Cantor, about people sending dimes to the president to combat this disease. And that's how it started. That's how the polio, the March of Dimes started. That is why FDR is on the dime. And despite some idiots that were trying to get Reagan on that dime, Nancy put the kibosh on that. Said, no way. That's never going to happen, because she pointed out that the reason why FDR is on that dime is because of the polio and March of Dimes. So that's sacrosanct. That'll never, his face will never be gone off the dime. But anyway, so polio, that was hugely successful. So by the time I was in elementary school, it had decreased dramatically from the 50s and the Salk vaccine. And then the last case in the wild was in the United States was in 1979. And then the last case brought to the United States, I believe, was 1993 or 1994, when somebody came from another country and brought it in. But it's endemic in just 3 countries: Pakistan, Afghanistan, and Nigeria. And hopefully in a few short years, that disease will be gone from the face of the earth, like smallpox has been. But our younger generations have no concept of that. They don't understand that the biggest reason why there are more people living longer is because of advent of vaccines. We have all these vaccinations now for kids, for the measles, the mumps, rubella, that MMR vaccine. And we have, when I was a kid, there was diphtheria, whooping, pertussis, and whooping cough, I believe. We had that. And all these other. And then you have the chicken pox one. When I was a kid, I had the measles, I had the mumps, and then when I was about 13 years old, I had chicken pox. And I mean, you couldn't avoid it. It was so contagious. All this stuff was so contagious. And so kids went through it, and some of them, there was no vaccine then. Some of them ended up in bad shape. But, and you know, even a few deaths here and there. Not like polio, but there were a few. But now, those are just like historic. Yeah, you'll hear little breakouts, you know, here and there of these old childhood diseases. But now almost everybody's vaccinated. And, which reminds me, at some point I'm going to have to get the shingles vaccine, since I have had the chicken pox when I was 13 years old. So I'm going to have to do that. But vaccines are damned important. They helped increase life expectancy for more people. There's no downside. Occasionally, yes, there are people who have reactions. Occasionally people die. That's like anything in life. And like this doctor wrote, for the New Yorker recently, the COVID vaccines are not dangerous. And it's a cost risk benefit. They worry about it, the adverse health effects, because they've been conned on television programs and such. So that's what that's about. I don't know what she's yapping about. But anyway, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to link this one, because he talks about the risks versus the benefits. And it says here, they urge vaccination because they see its ratio of risks to benefits is incredibly, unbelievably good. Better than over-the-counter pain relievers, better than many antibiotics, better than almost everything we routinely order and prescribe in the ER. 94% effective in preventing severe COVID-19 hospitalization and death. That was beyond my wildest dreams a year ago. So, I mean, it is. And I'm glad that Biden has put the screws on people. And I think anybody that comes to work, unless you've got a health issue, or even a religious issue, a real religious issue, not a holy roller church, but actually a doctrine such as Christian Science and maybe Dutch Reformed and a couple others. Unless you really have that, you deserve to get fired. You deserve not to be able to get on airplanes. You deserve everything you get there if you don't do what is adult, what is responsible, and get the vaccination. That's what you need to do. It ain't about your rights. And oh, by the way, that rally that was going on the other day that I talked about in a previous video, I don't know how that went. I didn't go down there, but I noticed the local media didn't cover it at all. And maybe they decided, we're not going to cover this because all that's doing is creating more of a problem with people being hesitant to get the vaccination. They need to be shunned. These people need to be shunned. They need to be pariahs. Everything. Because get the damn shot. Your life depends on it. And enough is enough. Enough is enough with this whiny crap of not getting the COVID vaccine.